Hi, this is Jennifer Miner, and today I'll be sharing with you the creation of a wooden sign I made for our home. I started by scavenging or salvaging a wooden crate that had been used to ship a countertop. Disassembled that and used our chop saw to trim it down. Here you can see the wood and with all the nails and screws removed. These are the 3 panels that ended up being 4 by 20, so for a total of 16 by 20. Here's the back side of those panels. I also used some of the support strips of wood to do the same thing for these. Just screw those down on the back of my wood panel. And here you can see the front of my wood panel all screwed together and ready to go. So I started by sanding my wood and then applying a pre-stain, and then came back and went ahead and applied a coat of red mahogany stain. This is just that first application. And then the stain, once it was wiped off, I also stained around the edges. And now my sign was ready for creation. So I went to my Silhouette Studio and started by creating the text for the sign, and used the Follow the Path tool to make that first sentiment curve, and added some flourishes that I purchased on the Silhouette online store. Put those just kind of around both. And here you can see I am laying this out the full size of my sign. Added my huckleberry at the bottom. Added the revolver and the star. Duplicated my revolver, flipped it, and then merged those together. So here you can see the finished sign for layout. And then I open a new tab and create 2 different stencils. This is a 12 by stencil and then an 8 by stencil with the 2 components separate. So once I've used my Silhouette to cut that, you can see this top gold piece is the top half or top portion of the design. So I'm going to go ahead and weed out my design from this 12 by 20 inch sheet of vinyl. And then I'm applying my transfer tape to the gold vinyl. And the block's there just to kind of help it from curling while I apply that. And then use my scraper to burnish or make sure that everything has a tight seal on it. And then I'm going to peel off the backing on my vinyl and apply it to my wood panel. And this transfer tape was super duper sticky, so I had a little bit of trouble. The vinyl for some reason didn't really want to stick down, but it just took a little bit of work, a little bit of fiddling, which you'll see once that gets applied. So I just laid that down, kind of centered my design, burnished again, making sure my vinyl was adhered to my wood as best as I could. Burnish, burnish, burnish. Really put some muscle in it. And then removed the transfer tape. As I mentioned, this was really strong transfer tape, so I had to kind of tweak it a little bit, make sure go slow to be sure that I didn't rip anything or pull any parts off. But once I finally got that transfer tape off, I went back. This is the most important part of stenciling with vinyl on wood, I think, is to burnish around the design to make sure that you have as tight a seal between the wood and the vinyl. This really just helps prevent any bleeding under the vinyl. And I did get a tiny bit, but this gold vinyl really did not want to stick to my wood. Sometimes that can mean that it's not well sanded, but in this case I did a 60 grit and then a 220, which should have been more than enough for this. And the pink vinyl that I used for the bottom portion, that seemed to not have a problem. And so we're going to actually skip ahead, and I will show you applying the bottom half of the stencil after I painted the top half, but we'll follow along on the huckleberry portion. So here we go again. This time I'm using an 8-inch sheet of vinyl with my sentiment, and you can see even though I had my blade set on 1, it did cut through this, but not all the way, which is fine. It's not a problem. So I'm going to use just kind of a scrap of that transfer tape that I had lying around. It doesn't quite cover my whole entire word, so all I did was take a couple of strips of masking tape to put over that tiny part of the Y and R that weren't covered. You can see that here. So I'm just using a little bit more masking tape to kind of give myself a guide. Line that up with the transfer tape on, apply it, and then burnish, burnish, burnish. There you can see removing the masking tape. In a pinch, you can totally use it, and it worked out great for this. So again, just very slowly and gradually removing the transfer tape. And I kind of like to come at it from both angles, and you'll see kind of wiggle my hand a little bit, and I feel like when you've got small pieces like that small part inside the R, that kind of helps not pull straight across. And then you'll see I have to reposition that part on my K, but it's not a problem. And now I've got my stencil where I want it. So again, just going around the edges in particular of all of my letters to make sure that they are well adhered. And then I'll be using this Waverly chalk paint in white. And I'm just using a basic sponge brush. These are super inexpensive. You can find them for less than $1 a piece. I kind of wish I'd had a different tool, but I just used what I had. So I'm doing a fairly light application and I'm pouncing. And I found for this particular stencil, the way the vinyl was kind of behaving, this really worked the best to get just a small amount of paint. And you can see it kind of even sponging off onto the solid parts of my vinyl just to kind of take a little bit of paint off. And just go through all the letters and that pouncing. This is the first time I've ever worked with that chalk paint, but I really liked it. I thought it worked nicely and loved the coverage for it. So just keep stenciling. Again, I do try to keep an eye and make sure no vinyl kind of warps or pulls up as I'm working. And just applying that first light coat. So I allow that first coat to dry, or in this case, it mostly dry, and then came back through with, again, another light coat of that chalk paint, just kind of going back over. I get kind of close to this paint, just I want to make sure that everything has an even coverage and an even coat on it. And you could do more coats of paint if you wanted. Now, some people choose to leave their stencils down until their paint is fully dry. I am crazy impatient, so I went ahead and pulled this off before my paint was fully dry, but you do have to be very, very careful when you pull that up because it's very easy to transfer paint or make a mess. So when I started to take this off, one thing I found was the vinyl was really stuck down kind of in the middle of the B and the R's. So I used my heat tool, two purposes. One, to kind of help the paint dry, and then second, it kind of warped up or softened the vinyl. So that's why you can see me using that heat tool there. It was really helpful to get those little pieces of vinyl up. And that's it. This is the finished version of the sign. I'm super happy with it. I'm still kind of trying to decide whether we do some distressing or not, but all in all, very happy with the product. This is totally something you could do yourself. So thanks guys for joining and have a great day.